4:06 on WMAL. Dan Mandis here for Vince Coglianese. Thank you very much for joining us. What will he say? Donald Trump. His press conference is going to start here in, about another 24 minutes or so. Now, we know what Kamala Harris is going to say. That's going to be nothing. But Donald Trump, these press conferences, he's liable to say anything. Joe Biden had this to say just a few hours ago. Peter Doocy from Fox News asked the president about Kamala Harris trying to distance herself from the last 3.5 years.
How much does it bother you that Vice President Harris might soon, for political reasons, start to distance herself from your economic
She's not going to.
You don't think she's going to?
Well, that is Joe Biden saying that Kamala Harris is not going to. I don't know what Harris is going to try to do, but Steve Moore, co-founder of the Committee to Unleash Prosperity and founder of the Club for Growth, I don't know, even if Kamala Harris wanted to distance herself from Joe Biden, I don't know if she can, because she has proudly said that that she was right there with every horrible decision for the last 3 years, proudly stating that she was the last person in the room.
Great point, Dan. And in fact, Susan Rice, she was one of the top and continues to be one of the top advisors to Joe Biden. A lot of people think she's been running the country over the last years. She said just the other day that Kamala Harris was, quote, an integral part of every decision that has been made in the Biden White House. Well, that's a pretty strong indictment, folks, because just about everything that Biden has done in the White House has been catastrophically wrong. I think most of the listeners of this show know that Kamala also passed the tie-breaking votes for two of those multi-trillion-dollar spending bills that caused the horrendous inflation we've seen over the last 3.5 years. Inflation has come down. That's good news. We're at 3% now on inflation. But by the way, did you know it was 1.5% when Trump left? So they're celebrating the fact that the inflation rate's still twice as high as it was when Trump left office. I think, look, I'm a Trump economic advisor. There are 4 or 5 of us that have been providing advice to Trump throughout this campaign. We want this campaign to be about the economy. We want to go head to head with them on who, ladies and gentlemen, voters of America, you remember what happened under Trump with the economy. Now look what's happened to the economy under Biden. Do you really want 4 more years of this? It comes down to that. Do you want 4 more years of, a border that we can't control? Do you want 4 more years of an inflation rate for many of the essentials are up more than 20%, 25 or 30%? Do you want a debt that has increased by $6-7 trillion in just 4 years? All of these things, virtually every economic statistic, Dan, and we have a little report we just put out to people. If you go to unleashprosperitynow.com, you can get this report for free, where we just compared the Trump record and the Biden record on the economy for about 20 of the major economic measurements, whether it's jobs, whether it's the inflation rate, whether it's gas prices, whether it's small business conditions, real incomes to families. On virtually every single one of these, Trump's record is far superior to Biden's.
Well, I'm going to play this audio bite, Steve. You mentioned Susan Rice, and you're right, top Biden-Obama advisor. And this is her talking about Kamala Harris being an integral architect of the Biden-Harris administration.
I think it's very important to remember that this has been the Biden-Harris agenda. Kamala Harris has been an integral architect and executor of the policies of the Biden-Harris administration. But this notion that she somehow doesn't deserve credit for and isn't part of and wasn't an integral architect of the Biden-Harris administration agenda is not only false, it's frankly somewhat bizarre and offensive.
So here's what I'm trying to figure out what's going on with the Democrat Party, Steve.
Right.
Because on the one hand, you've got Kamala Harris's people perhaps telling her that she needs to distance herself from Joe Biden, yet you've got Susan Rice tying her like an anchor to the Biden administration. What is going on? What is it they actually want?
Well, I think this is an example of where, the Biden people really want to pretend like their administration was a success when in every single way it was an abject failure on foreign policy, on the economy, on inflation, on border. I mean, somebody's got to point to me anything that went right in the Biden administration. So they're trying to rewrite history as it's happening and saying, oh, Biden was a success. Bidenomics was a success. What? Really? I mean, I'm trying to find anything that actually worked well during the Biden administration. Now, the other thing, Dan, that's going to happen, I think that it's going to happen either tomorrow or over the weekend, is Kamala Harris. This is an example of where she wants to kind of distance herself from Biden. She's going to give a talk. Apparently, I read it for this, Dan. She has a plan to bring inflation down.
Yeah.
So you're like, oh, gee, thanks for telling us now. 1,250 days into the administration of
and thousands of dollars for Americans, and you're right. Are you talking about the price controls?
Yeah, the price controls, which, by the way, I think I'm probably a little older than you because I grew up in the 70s. I think you're a little younger than I am. But we tried price controls in the 1970s. It was actually Richard Nixon who tried price controls. I remember he gave a speech. I was like 12 years old, and he's saying, everything is just going to hold prices for exactly where they are for the next, I forget, like 180 days. I'm like, I was like 12 years old, and I said, this sounds really stupid to me. But this is what Kamala Harris is trying. And what price controls do, just so people understand, when you have price controls, it leads to shortages because then you can't sell things. And she's going to go after grocery stores. She's saying grocery stores are price gouging. No, they're not. If you look at you ask anybody who runs or owns a grocery store or a 7-Eleven or one of these marts, their markups are so tiny. I'm surprised they even can stay in business. They're not price gouging. The reason that the grocery stores are costing a lot of money is because everything's more expensive. And so that is a result. Again, I want to connect the dots for your listeners because this isn't complicated. The reason these prices shot up was because Biden and Harris came in and spent $6 and $7 trillion. And guess how we financed that? We printed money.
Yep. Well, here's what's interesting. So she's going to go out, and she's going to say that the grocery stores and whatever, they are price gouging. They're ripping off the American people. They're taking advantage of the American people. Mm-hmm. To me, what she's trying to do is obfuscate the terrible decisions that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris made. Right. So if it's the grocery store's fault, then it can't possibly be their fault for all of those spending bills and, the war on domestic oil production and, all of the other things that they did that torpedoed our economy. It's like this is just them trying to shift the blame elsewhere.
Well, Dan, you put it very well. I mean, you're exactly right that, remember, by the way, when the inflation rate was 1.5% when Trump left office. So there was no inflation when Trump left. And then Biden took that inflation rate in 18 months. Are you ready for this, Dan? From 1.5 to 9.1%. Now, I wouldn't even have thought that was possible to screw things up that quickly, but somehow they did it. 9.1% inflation. Now it's come down, but as every one of your listeners knows, because you've got smart listeners, the inflation rate is coming down, but prices aren't coming down. They're still 20 to 25 to 30% more expensive than they were when Biden came into office. And so now, remember, throughout this, they keep trying to blame everyone that they're south. First, it was Putin. Then it was the gas station. Remember the gas station owners? Those are the people causing gas prices. Then they tried to blame the supply chain problems. Well, of course, we didn't have supply chain problems when Trump was president. It's amazing that they try to blame everyone but themselves. And just last week, did you see Kamala tried to blame Trump for the inflation that her administration caused?
I got to tell you, this this administration, if they're good at anything, it's gaslighting. But I don't think anybody's really believing it. This is what is shocking to me. First of all, it is interesting because the more that Kamala Harris speaks, the more you realize, number one, I don't think that she has a plan. I don't think that she understands that there are things that they can do to bring costs down, like, for example, deregulation. We could talk about all of the things that we always talk about. But, Trump understands because he did it in his first administration. What's interesting, though, on the one hand, Kamala, again, going back to our original discussion, is she going to try to distance herself from Joe Biden? Well, this is an example of her earlier today, bragging that she cast the tie-breaking vote on the so-called Inflation Reduction Act.
2 years ago, as vice president, I was proud to cast the tie-breaking vote that sent the bill.
I mean, here's the deal, is that, number one, they all admitted that the Inflation Reduction Act, it was never really designed to reduce inflation. It was just, very cynically named. And so it's almost like she's got an identity crisis.
Well, first of all, I've never called it the Inflation Reduction Act. I've always called it the Inflation Acceleration Act because it actually made inflation worse. The one thing they tried to do was Medicare price controls. Now, guess what? A lot of the Medicare plans are dropping drug coverage from their plans, so seniors are getting screwed by that bill. Meanwhile, inflation gets higher and higher and higher. So, how do you, if you're Kamala Harris, how do you go out there and brag about that bill? It was supposed to actually reduce the original estimates were that it was going to reduce the deficit by like $300 billion over 10 years. Now the latest estimate is it's going to increase the deficit by about $1 trillion, just like everything they've done. I mean, can you show me one single spending reduction that they've made?
Well, my spending has been reduced because I don't have as much money.
Yeah, right. I'm talking about the government spending.
Oh, them. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I'm talking about what they. Yeah, exactly. What what you just said is so true. We're cutting our spending as Americans while the government gets fatter and more obese and more wasteful. I mean, there's $300 billion. Just to give you an example, $300 billion, not million, $300 billion for a green energy slush fund. What's that money for? It's not for that money isn't going to change the temperature of the planet. It's to pass out money to the Sierra Club and all the green energy groups and all the liberal Democratic groups. It's like a scam, right? It's basically peyote for all of the interest groups that help get them elected. So, but I don't think look, Dan, the bottom line is I don't think the American people are going to fall for this. Just saw a poll the other day. 60% of Americans think that the United States is in a recession right now. Now, technically, we're not in a recession, but Americans are so financially squeezed, they feel like we're in a recession.
I think part of what the American people are ticked off about is, the media in Kamala Harris and these folks are trying to tell us the economy's fine, and they'll talk to all of these, hardcore number crunchers, these economists. But as you said earlier, we go to the grocery store, like everyday Americans go to the grocery store, and it's like, if the economy's fine, then why am I still paying an extra $100, $150 for groceries from where I was, 4 years ago? Donald Trump is going to be having a press conference here in the next couple of minutes. From an economic standpoint, he did come out the other day, and he's, as far as I can tell, he's got a couple of things that he is pitching. He is saying that he is going to be able to cut our energy costs in half in his second term if he is reelected. No tax on tips, of course, and also no taxes on Social Security. Those are the big three. What else can Donald Trump say today to convince the American people that it is him that can help lower the cost of goods?
Well, first of all, we know he can do it because he did it, right?
Yep.
In other words, we had the inflation rate under Donald Trump's 4 years in office was 1.9% per year, which is actually below what the Fed target is for where they want the inflation rate to be. So he's already done it. We know he can do it again. We're going to drill, baby, drill. We're going to get government off the back of our businesses. We are going to try to make some progress on reducing this enormous debt problem that we have in this country by getting rid of hundreds of billions of dollars of wasteful programs. I could go on and on, but I think people have to remember we did not have an inflation problem when Trump was president. It only started when Joe Biden and Kamala Harris came in, and end of story. It's really
I think Steve. I think it's three things, and we'll leave it with this: deregulation, letting those Trump tax cuts continue and not sunset. And also, as you said, drill, baby, drill. Those are three things right there that Donald Trump, and he has been talking about that. Steve, it's always so great to speak with you, and I've interviewed you before. You're always terrific. How can people find you on Twitter?
Just go to unleashprosperity.com, and you can get all the reports we've done, and I think people will see the truth. Dan, great to be with you this afternoon.
Dan Mandis in for Vince Coglianese. Appreciate you listening to WMAL. Vince returns on Monday. You can find out more about me on the socials, all of them at Dan Mandis Show. Follow me on Twitter if you would. I'll follow you back. And again, that is at Dan Mandis Show. So I'm really curious as to what Donald Trump is going to say in mere moments from New Jersey. We're going to carry the press conference, and so we'll grab it from the beginning. But, you know, Kamala Harris, and I was talking about this at the beginning of the radio program, she trolled, or I believe attempted to troll, Donald Trump ahead of the press conference with a press release that is nothing short of out of Mean Girls and the Burn Book. I mean, this is like a fifth grader. So I want to read this to you, and I'm going to be curious to see if Donald Trump takes the bait. This is an official press release from Kamala Harris. Donald Trump to ramble incoherently and spread dangerous lies in public, but at different home. Today at 4:30 p.m., Donald J. Trump, loser of the 2020 election by 7 million votes, will hold another public meltdown in Bedminster, New Jersey. They talk about the date and the time. Venue, not a battleground state. This is the preview. Not so fresh off of NABJ, Florida, and Twitter glitches. Donald Trump intends to deliver another self-obsessed rant full of his own personal grievances to distract from his toxic Project 2025 agenda, unpopular running mate, and increasing detachment from the reality of the voters who will decide this election. She says these remarks will not be artificial intelligence, but they certainly will lack intelligence. Banning abortion, raising costs on families, confusing basic facts, cutting Social Security and Medicare, blocking border security, and being publicly unstable, unfit, and unwell will not help his struggling campaign for president. Tune in for the same old thing. You know, that whole thing, you could flip it and just say that whole thing is about Joe Biden. So I think that sounds like it was written by a fifth grader. We'll see what Donald Trump does. We'll hear from the president, former president, coming up in just minutes right here on WMAL. 4:36 on WMAL. My name is Dan Mandis, in for Vince Coglianese. The former president, Donald Trump, awaiting his press conference, and we are going to take it live. We're kind of right now on door watch. Out there in Bedminster, New Jersey, you've got a lot of flags, actually, and we're waiting the former president and his press conference, expecting a lot of conversations about money, about our economy, about your economy. So that's going to be one of the things, certainly, that the former president talks about. Really, he'll come out with some opening statements, as he always does, and I believe the statements will sound familiar to us. Really, when it starts to get interesting is when the media starts asking questions. Now, remember, the biggest thing that the president is doing right now is he is contrasting himself and his campaign to the campaign of Kamala Harris, which really is the campaign of silence. I mean, they're not doing anything except going out and talking on stage, but not really answering any questions from the media, not granting any interviews, no press conferences, and so forth. What I'm going to do, guys, is I'm going to go ahead and Ann, I'm going to take a call from Ann in Alexandria. Ann, I might have to bail on your call very quickly because if the president comes to the podium. But go ahead. Sure. What do you want to hear the president say tonight?
Well, my advice based on that press release that Kamala sent out that you just described a few minutes ago, I'd start out by saying, hey guys, before we get into my text, did you get a load of that press release they sent out? I mean, what, is she running for president of elementary school or for the fifth grade? I can't tell. But all I have to say is you fact-checked me on everything, on every joke, on every word I put out. Fact-check that press release. Because by our count, there are at least 20 lies in there. So I expect you to fact-check her like you do me.
Absolutely. And Ann, I appreciate the call very much. And if you're just joining us, Kamala Harris put out this really just immature fifth grade kind of press release. And really, and I pointed it out at the beginning of the show, I actually did, and in case you missed it, in the 3 o'clock hour, I read the press release and I had more time. I was able to fact check a lot of that press release, and it was full of lies. It really was. And I think that the media, they're getting close, I think, to starting to really fact check Kamala Harris, because and I've been documenting for you the last couple of days, I'm sure we all have here on WMAL, where they are asking questions. Why will you not grant interviews? Perhaps, maybe the next step is actually for the media fact-checking some of what Kamala Harris has to say. Becky is on line 1 in Arlington. Becky, I may need to jump real quick in case the president starts talking, but what do you got? Go ahead.
Okay, he needs to knock off the name calling. Don't take the bait. What he needs to do is he needs to do commercials about Tampon Tim's COVID crackdown. And Greg Gutfeld showed police paintballing people.
Yep.
In contrast to the riots.
Mm-hmm.
There are many seniors who are having to go back to work. And he needs to look at and she signed that inflation. She broke the tie on that Inflation Reduction Act.
Yep.
That would tax tips, and now she's saying she's not going to tax tips. And he needs to talk about how she is descended from Hamilton Brown, who was a slave owner in Jamaica and who was against the abolition of slavery.
Right.
She kept people in jail.
Hey, Becky, I'm gonna have to put you on hold. The president is on. Go ahead, guys.
People are coming into our country by the millions and millions and millions. We have no idea who they are, or where they come from. But we're also a failing economy. Kamala Harris is a radical California liberal who broke the economy, broke the border, and broke the world, frankly. Very destructive to the entire world, because as we go, oftentimes the world goes. She destroys everything she touches, and if she wins, your finances and your country will never recover. You're never going to recover. A radical left person wants to put price controls all over the place, which will end up driving up your prices, not down your prices. Harris has just declared that tackling inflation will be a day one priority for her. It's going to be day one. But day one, really, for Kamala was 3.5 years ago. Where has she been? And why hasn't she done it? Why hasn't she done it? I hear her complaining all the time. She was the border czar, but she didn't do anything. It's the worst border czar in history. There's never been a border czar so bad. She's been unbelievable in terms of her badness to some of our allies, some of our great allies. You know who I'm talking about. Here is the record of economic calamity that Kamala is desperate for voters to ignore. She cast the tie-breaking votes that caused record inflation. She cast the votes. She's trying to blame Biden, as you know. So it was Biden, but I'm going to do a better job. But it was her. And if she wants to do a better job, she's still got 5 months left, right? But she can't do a better job because she doesn't know how to. And she's of a place in life where she wouldn't know what a better job is. Going to destroy our country. And as a result of Kamala's inflation price hikes, they've cost a typical household a total of $28,000. These are numbers coming from government. They're not coming from me. $28,000 she's cost the typical household. Kamala's inflation nightmare continues to cost the average American family $1,100 every single month. $1,100. Again, government numbers. You're paying $148 more a month on food. It's every month. Average family, because Kamala and her ideas, and Joe Biden too, I mention him, but he's sort of gonzo. It all started with the debate. I should have been a little bit easy. Somebody said, your debate performance was horrible. I said, why? Because you forced him out of government. But I believe she'll be just as bad. I believe she's maybe in many ways going to be worse, because he wasn't really a radical left, but she is. She's real. He wasn't real. So I think she's going to be, in many ways, easier to beat than Joe Biden. What they did to him was disgraceful, by the way, and it really is a threat to democracy. It was a coup by people that wanted him out, and they didn't do not the way they're supposed to do it. $129 more on energy and $241 more. This is all per month on rent. So you have that, $148, $129, $241, and then many other increases. You add it all up, it's thousands and thousands of dollars that she and he have cost people. The cost of a typical monthly mortgage has doubled since I left office, and that number was about 3 months old from government, and now it's tripled. We had mortgage rates at around 2%, close to 2%, and they're now at 10%, and you can't get a mortgage. So that means it's a lot higher than 10%. I guess it is whenever they want to give over the money, and that's a lot more than 10%. So when you think about double, they've actually quadrupled or more than that. Think of that, quadrupled, which really kills the American dream for young people. Young people are being devastated by what they've done to our country. Grocery prices have skyrocketed. Cereals are up 26%. Bread is up 24%. Butter is up 37%. Baby formula is up 30%. Flour is up 38%. And eggs are up 46%. And many items are up at much higher rates than that. Now Kamala is reportedly proposing communist price controls. She wants price controls. And if they worked, I'd go along with it too, but they don't work. They actually have the exact opposite impact and effect. But it leads to food shortages, rationing, hunger, dramatically more inflation. Their Inflation Reduction Act, by the way, was a disaster. It's what caused the inflation. Their Inflation Reduction Act was a con job. They actually admitted that it wasn't really for inflation that they did it. They don't know why they did it, but they named it the Inflation Reduction Act, which was a very nice name. Got approved based on that. Unfortunately, people didn't understand it. I understood it. I said that's going to cause tremendous inflation, and it did, among other things like energy. She's running on the Maduro plan. We call it the Maduro plan, like something straight out of Venezuela or the Soviet Union. This announcement is an admission that her economic policies have totally failed and caused really a catastrophe for our country, and beyond that, a catastrophe in the world. A little bit unrelated, but not totally unrelated. We have wars breaking out in the Middle East. We have the horrible war going on with Ukraine and Russia. All these things would have never happened if I was president. Would have never, ever happened, and they didn't happen. Since Harris took office, car insurance is up 55%, and they just announced it's going to be substantially higher than that within the next week. They expect big increases in car insurance. It's out of control, and insurance generally. Thanks to Kamala's war on American energy, electricity prices are up 32%. Gasoline prices are up 50% and going higher. Meanwhile, real incomes are down by over $2,000 a year. So the incomes for people are down $2,000 on average a year, government numbers. The typical American has seen a 4% pay cut under Kamala and Biden. Crooked Joe Biden. Credit card debt has exploded by 50% under Harris to a record high. It's now at a record high. It's never been anywhere close. Since March, and by the way, people are going to have to start paying that, and it's not going to be a pretty sight for the next period of time. It could be a substantial time. Since March of 2022, the average middle-class household has lost $33,000 in wealth. How about that? $33,000. That's average. In July alone, 350,000 people were added to the unemployment rolls. It's a lot of people. 350,000 people added to the unemployment rolls. And think of that. That's in 1 month. That's in July. Virtually 100% of the net job creation in the last year has gone to migrants. You know that? Most of the job creation has gone to migrants. In fact, I've heard that substantially more than beyond the number of 100%. It's a much higher number than that, but the government hasn't caught up with that yet. But virtually right now, as of the time they did this, virtually 100% of the net job creation in the last year has gone to migrants. Harris gave work permits and Social Security numbers to more than 3 million illegal immigrants to steal jobs from Americans. So think of that. And, you know, they're having a lot of problems with Social Security. I'm going to be the one to save Social Security, but they're having a lot of problems with Social Security because under their system of putting all of these people into it, it's going to blow up and fail. If she's elected, Social Security will fail. It'll be a blow-up like you've never seen before. It'll be a bankruptcy of the entire system, probably the nation itself. You don't have to imagine what a Kamala Harris presidency would be because you're living through that nightmare right now, and it is a nightmare. It's a nightmare. And you're going to stop inflation, but we're going to have a crash, and we're going to have a crash like a 1929 crash if she gets in. You saw a gentleman yesterday who got up, one of the top analysts in the world, frankly, and said that if Trump isn't elected, he predicts, and he's predicting you'll have a stock market crash like 1929. He also said the only time and the only reason the stock market has gone up, even though it had some bad moments recently. But I think we'll take a substantial lead. You saw the polls come out today. We're leading in most of the polls, but you'll have a. I have a lot of friends over there. So I don't think they're reporters, however, are they? This was supposed to be for reporters. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. When I left office, I handed Kamala and crooked Joe Biden a surging economy with no inflation. The 30-year mortgage rate was around 2%. Gasoline had reached $1.87 a gallon. We actually had many months where it was lower than that, but we hit $1.87, which was a perfect place, an absolutely beautiful number. Real income surged by more than $4,200 a year when I was president. Harris and Biden blew it all up. And if Kamala wins the election, the worst is yet to come. You'll have a real problem in the future because people don't respect her in the world. People don't respect her in the economy. Economists are laughing. They can't even believe this is happening to our country. And she wants to change a free enterprise type country into a communist type country. That's what she knows. She's considered far more radical than Bernie Sanders. That's all you have to know, far more radical. And she picked somebody that's far more radical than Bernie Sanders. He approved a bill recently, tampons in boys' bathrooms. He wants tampons in boys' bathrooms. It's terrible. It's terrible. But that's the person that she picked. Surprising pick to me. I was shocked. He's also got one of the worst run states. Many people are leaving the state, sixth most. And from her state, she destroyed, as the Attorney General, she destroyed California along with Gavin Newsom. And she, San Francisco, you know, was a great city 15 years ago. Now it's considered almost unlivable. You can't live there. And what they've done to that great state with the beautiful weather like this weather, they have this weather all the time. And they have the ocean, they have the sun, they have everything good. But what they've done to it is a shame. And she's going to do the same thing to our country. It was the policies. They had a recent article, and I didn't know this, but you're allowed to rob a store as long as it's not more than $950. Has everyone ever heard of that? You can rob a store, and you have these thieves going into stores with calculators calculating how much it is. Because if it's less than $950, they can rob it and not get charged. That was her that did that. Harris is campaigning on the largest tax increase in American history, including ending the Trump tax cuts, one of the largest tax cuts ever in our country's history, and working with families, a gigantic capital gains tax hike they want, and a new wealth confiscation tax. It's called wealth confiscation tax, which isn't going to make all of her supporters, you know, she's got some supporters that are wealthy people because they're stupid people, but they're wealthy people. She said that a 70 to 80% tax rate is, quote, a bold idea that should be discussed and studied. 70 to 80%. She co-sponsored legislation to abolish very popular private health insurance, which 150 Americans rely on, dumping everyone onto inferior socialist government-run healthcare systems with rationing and deadly wait times while massively raising your taxes. She wants to take away your private health care. There are many people in this country who spend a lot of money on private health care. It's the best health care in the world, by the way. But they want to do it. They worked hard to make money, and they want to do it. Under her, you're not going to have private health care plans anymore. And you can be a wealthy person or middle-income person and you want to spend on a really good plan, better than a government plan could be, far better, and you're not going to be allowed. You're all going to be thrown into a communist system. It's a communist system. You're going to be thrown into a system where everybody gets health care. You wait for your doctor like 10 months, 12 months, 11 months. You got to see some of these plans, how they work in other countries. It's disgraceful. So private health care is gone. She wants it out. Now, she could change on that, and she might change on that. She's changed on everything, but I said, why are you changing? I actually was asking somebody that knows her, why is she changing? She had these policies.
You are listening to former President Donald Trump, of course, live from Bedminster, New Jersey, and a lot of very familiar themes of the economy, talking about Kamala Harris as borders are and that epic failure, the cost of groceries and inflation, talking about the rise in mortgage rates. And again, these are themes that former President Donald Trump does have to keep hitting. Now, what I'm really looking forward to, and that's coming up very soon, is the former president taking questions from the media, which is something that Kamala Harris, not to belabor the point, but you know what? As long as she's not taking questions from the media, then we will keep hammering the fact that she refuses to do exactly what Donald Trump is doing right now.